that my proposal be held anonymous as to who is individually providing the 3 ticket packages, which is, of course, who is myself. I insist to be anonymous in that regard, and I would respectfully ask the media to respect my request in that regard, that I, as the potential donor of the 3 ticket packages, be held anonymous. My continued anonymity is paramount. During your deliberation, I want you to focus, please, all of you, on the first responders who attended the scene of the horrific and devastating crash of the bus carrying the Junior A hockey team of the SJ, the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, the Humboldt Broncos. I would ask you, while you're all thinking about this, to bear in mind that this is not entirely about that junior hockey team in and of itself, and to think of that disaster, that tragedy, as having had an effect on their whole community, the entire hockey fraternity, indeed our entire nation of Canada and beyond. And while you're contemplating all of this, please know and remember that you and me and everyone, all of us, are caring, compassionate, good people. This is an opportunity for our great little city of Lacombe to reach out to our good neighbors from that humble little town in Saskatchewan, to invite Humboldt's mayor to designate whomever is deemed to be delegated to visit Lacombe and our classy hospitality. Again, please think outside of and beyond the players, instead perhaps toward emergency response people or town councillors there and any citizen from there who has endured the horror and the heartache of that tragedy, which would have affected their whole town and would have put that town into turmoil and shock. And you could all look forward to, each of you being the good and classy people that you all are, to providing personal hospitality to those Saskatchewan people and entertaining them while proudly showing them around our beautiful city, around Lacombe, which we're all proud of. Please don't be discouraged by the fact that at that very exact time, the team itself, the Broncos, may very well be heavily and deep into their own playoffs in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, and that meanwhile our senior hockey playoffs supporters will be continuously wishing them well and cheering for them to win their respective championship. Whether it be your Lacombe Generals or me as a proud citizen of Lacombe, or me as a proud and productive part of the Innisfail Eagles, which is Lacombe General's fiercest rival. I belong to the Innisfail Eagles. All of us, each of us, would continue in our hearts to root for the Broncos. Of course we would all. What I've said and what I've implied is a concept which I would hope could be suggested to the Mayor and Town Council of Humboldt in the event that you would graciously find that it is an idea to be a good and decent thing to do. This would be, in essence, a statement, a very strong statement, that we care, that we, Lacombe, are a city of good people, we are a community, and we are Humboldt strong. To be clear, approximately $4,000 is not terribly far-reaching. This is about the well-being of our community and the community of Humboldt, actually the well-being of many communities across this great country called Canada. This is about concern and respect and appreciation. It's about decency, fellowship. This has nothing to do with the upcoming hockey playoffs of the Humboldt Broncos. It's about their community of undying support. In fact, this is Lacombe's opportunity to cheer that team on by inviting their mayor as our guest and 2 others, and their choices of that mayor and his council for two more guests, including for a total of 3 to come to Lacombe in April of 2019. This is about helping our great place, which we all love, which we're all proud of, Lacombe, about helping Lacombe to be even better by reaching out to Humboldt with high regard for respect and decency and honor and friendship and courage, about making our entire region of Western Canada better, because it's the right thing to do, All communities in Western Canada share the same values. Ultimately, for you to sanction this idea, my proposal, your collective council decision needs to come straight from the heart, to be then representing the kindness in the hearts of everyone in Lacombe that we are Humboldt strong. Thank you. I am an enigma.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Appreciate you taking the opportunity to make use of the open forum. We're a little bit over time here, but if there's anybody that has any quick questions, I will allow them. If not, thank you once again. We will be discussing this matter in camera at a later date.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening all.
So it's 5:08 now I have, and I will call this evening's meeting to order for November 5th, 2018. And before we get into the agenda, I think that we've got one exciting announcement to go over first. Chief Gowdy.
Yes, we do. I wanted to introduce our new Community Services Director, Deborah Juke. Deborah started November 1st, so this is her third day with us. Comes to us from the MD of Opportunity, where she spent a number of years in their senior management of legislative services with responsibility for a variety of portfolios, which she's brought that experience with her today to help us. Most recently, she was the Municipal District's Deputy CAO. Prior to that, she was in bylaw services in BC and a myriad of other experiences. So Deb and her family, including her dogs, are excited to be joining us here in Central Alberta, and we're happy to have her. Welcome aboard, Deborah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Has everybody had an opportunity to go through the agenda? Actually, one thing before we move on. So now we've got two community directors. Just to show what an awesome community Lacombe is, we have to have two directors for it, so that's great. Welcome aboard. Back to the agenda. Any additional items? Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I don't have an additional item, but I will move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Thank you very much. Don't see any other additional inputs, so all those in favor? None? Thank you. And is Louise Rellis here? If you care to come forward, we've got a presentation entitled Early Years Matter. I understand you're with that coalition. I'll just remind you, for the benefit of everybody watching at home and for the gallery, if I could have you use your microphone there. When the red light is on, you're good to go. So there'll be a gray button in the bottom right. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to present here to you tonight. I am here on behalf of the Early Years Matter Coalition, and we are a coalition representing the communities of Alex, Bentley, Black Falls, Clive, Eckville and Lacombe. And I hope everyone had the chance to go through the presentation that was sent out in advance. So excuse me, I'm going to keep to my notes just to keep me on track and try and keep me on time. So the Early Childhood Coalitions, we are one of 98 coalitions in Alberta. There are coalitions across Canada also. So we're supported through the Cross Ministry of Governments of Alberta Education, Alberta Community and Social Services and Alberta Health. So as a coalition, we're tasked with raising public awareness of the importance of the early years, what that is in respect of brain development and kindergarten readiness. We share data with communities and encouraging community partners to use this data in making decisions about community development. We identify community strengths and needs, and we identify and increase awareness of existing community resources. So the data that we're talking about here today is EDI, Early Development Instrument. It's a short questionnaire given to kindergarten teachers to complete about their students in the kindergarten year. It measures a children's ability to meet age-appropriate developmental expectations, and it's used across Canada and internationally. It's measured in the aspect of on track, children who are developing appropriately, at risk, children who are slower than expected, and vulnerable, children who are struggling and vulnerable in domains. So we have 5 developmental domains, which are physical health and well-being, social competence, emotional maturity, language and cognitive development, communication and general knowledge. And with these 5 developmental domains, we have 4 priority areas in raising the awareness. We have knowledge mobilisation, which is part of my task here tonight. We have community engagement, coalition development, and collaborative planning. It's a little bit small on my screen here. So we have to support and engage parents, community members and early childhood professionals. And with that we use our Facebook page, Instagram account. We have bi-monthly meetings and we've had lunch and learns earlier this year, and I have presented previously to Lacombe Council. We attend community events, Bright Futures Play Academy. Community events, and they're a great partnership at our coalition, and they invite us to attend all of their community events within their areas. We distribute resources. We have I'm Ready booklets. We're currently working on a Take 5 to Make Change campaign, which is a campaign that we have utilised work of the Red Deer Early Years Coalition, in that it only takes 5 minutes for parents to promote early childhood development with their children. The I'm Ready campaign books, I have brought copies with me. This booklet just goes through the developmental domains. It touches on areas, bullet points on how parents, caregivers can help kids. These resources I will leave on the desk for you to peruse after. And we partner with other organisations. So we have partnerships at our coalition table from Neighbourhood Place, Kids Connection, FCSS, Loving to Learn Preschool here in town, and Bright Futures Play Academy, Alberta Health Services and Parent Link. In my presentation I included a video link for the Offord Centre. The Offord Centre is the centre over managing the survey and the questionnaires that the teachers would have done on the kindergarten skids. They correlated all the information together and they sent it back to us. If you haven't already done so, I do encourage you to look at that link. It pretty much says everything that I could need to say, and just don't have the time to say it. So I'll just jump ahead to show that there's been over 1 million questionnaires completed, EDIs completed in Canada thus far, 12 of 13 provinces and territories. And as we get into the results, you will see that you've been given the results as Lacombe County as a whole, and then for each community within Lacombe. You will also notice that Clive and Alex have been grouped together, and Neckville and Bentley have been grouped together, and this is because for the questionnaires to be scored, there's a minimum requirement of students' results. So the minimum requirements are too low in the communities individually, so they have been grouped together for results purposes. So it's broken down into the areas that we talked about: on track, at risk and vulnerable. And without going into too much detail, touching on all the communities' results, but for the city of Lacombe, you will see that the major area is emotional maturity, one of the major areas in the pie chart. So what we are tasked with in these areas for emotional maturity is kids include the ability to think before acting, their ability to deal with their feelings at an age-appropriate level, and their empathic responses to others. So it's looking at how kids are developing in that area in Lacombe. Also breaking it down to each of the others here, we have social competence. It includes their curiosity about the world, their eagerness to try new things, and their ability to control their behaviour, following rules and playing well with others. For physical health and well-being, it's their fine motor and gross motor skills, whether they can run in the playground or their ability to hold a pencil. Unfortunately, a lot of kids now start school with the ability to be able to swipe a screen but not to be able to hold a pencil. So that they've adequate energy levels for class as well, that they can attend school and that they have the ability and the energy level to stay on task for the day age appropriately. Their independence as well as looking at their own needs. For language and cognitive development, it's their early writing skills, it's their age appropriate literacy and numeracy skills, and their understanding similarities and differences with things, and their memory skills. For communication and general knowledge, it's their ability to communicate their needs and their wants in a socially acceptable manner, again age appropriately, their storytelling, and their knowledge about life and world around them. So again, with all that encompassing, it is age appropriate for kindergarten kids. So looking at the results, and collectively 1 in 4 children are not reaching their developmental domain by kindergarten, and looking at it in the community-wise, it's quite significant that 1 in 4 children are not where they need to be when they start school. Collectively, that can make a major impact on the community later in life financially. It has been reported, and as well going down through the presentation here, investing in early years. For every dollar that's invested in one of those 4 kids now in the early years saves you $8 per adult later in life. Early childhood development, what that looks like in early toxic stresses and all the impact of that is how they develop as an adult, what their reactions to life is when they grow up, whether they want to finish high school, what kind of career they want to have, if they're going to hold down long-term employment, or if they're going to be a burden on society financially. So looking at it in the perspective of paying at the expense of $1 per every 4 kid, 1 in 4 kids now, compared to $8 for 1 in 4 adults later in life. So the EDI results, they give us a snapshot of how the children are doing now, and they give us a clear direction of how we can help them develop, how we can help parents and caregivers with their kids. We've been given the results, we know the areas where we need to kind of work on, so now collectively, how can we come together, how can we collaborate together, how can we help each other to help the children in our community, set them up for success. We know we've been given the direction of where they can go for failure, so how can we retrain that, how can we change the lens to see where we can help these children to succeed. So the EDI data has been used quite progressively over the years. It was originally started in 2009 up for a 5-year process, and what they learned over those 5 years is like, okay, this is a lot more tasking serious than what we initially thought, and 1 5-year snapshot is not an adequate undertaking, and it doesn't give a clear description of how kids are doing in the communities collected over 5 years. So that they refocused, and they're taking, what they're doing now is every 2 years they're taking these questionnaires. Kindergarten teachers are going to be questioning questionnaires on their kids, and moving forward they're looking at a long-term vision with short-term goals. So what the goal is at the moment, every 2 years we're going to have these new results that we can clearly see what direction each community is going. So the EDI data has been quite significant for our coalition. It was a driving force behind the community of Eckville getting a parent link and the community of Black Falls getting a parent link. So the results they're taking notice. They're seeing the importance behind this survey, and it's definitely taken notice. Ministries, researchers are doing the EDI. It's giving the clearest snapshot that we can get of how our children are doing, and it helps us come back to, okay, we can see how they're progressing in the communities. We can see what resources are available in the communities. Where are we lacking? How can we help them in the areas that they need help? What's not in the communities, and what can we help bring? So we have identified domains of development where children are strong, and we've identified where they need more help. So in recognising those struggles and their abilities, our aim is to form partnerships that best address these needs. How can we build a stronger foundation for the children in our communities moving forward? How can we start that community dialogue? Again, what's in our community? What is that enabling for our children, and what's not in their community? Where is our weakest link? Where are the families that we're not reaching that we need to reach? Where are those less advantaged families, maybe from not the greatest of backgrounds? How can we help them? How can we build them up to be stronger? How can we make them aware that it's just simple things, small 5 minutes, that's what it takes for kids to build their brains, sitting down reading a book, the benefits of that, and how can we identify their barriers? What barriers are families and parents experiencing? What are they not aware of when it comes to early childhood development? A couple of the ideas that we have, again, because we represent 6 quite diverse communities, an aim is for a collaboration with each individual community, and an early years table within each community. So together, collectively, we can as a whole come with a vision and a goal. but individually in the community, each community with a partnership, we can look at small short-term goals. So for example, Lacombe, the community of Lacombe could take on is signage in parks, in playgrounds. Just a couple of snippets, bullet points of how parents can help their kids develop their brains by playing in a playground, especially loose parts playgrounds. Another option would be a playground map. If the city of Lacombe was to utilise a map on their website, printed map of where the playgrounds are available in the community, what age group each playground might be utilised for, so parents can just click on the website, maybe the map's available throughout the community, and make them more aware of playgrounds they might not have known were there, and then what age group those playgrounds are for. Also, moving in for future, if the city is building a playground, that they keep in mind the early years, children from 0 to 5, and have maybe a specific area in that playground. Maybe we can have a chat together and with the play groups and that are in the community to see how we can make a playground more early childhood friendly. More resources would be, what I would like to see in each community is don't walk on the sidewalk. Similar to what some schools have where you don't walk in the corridor, they have little painted areas for children to hop and skip and jump and things like that. If there was some painted areas on the sidewalk away from the road closer to the wall where children can hop from one circle to another, there's a straight line where they have to try and balance on that. Simple, low cost things that can be so effective for children, because really you're helping them develop in nearly all of those 5 domains from that simple little task of hopping from one to another, because they're thinking, their cognitive skills are going, their fine motor skills are in work, they're thinking, they're planning ahead to what they're going to do next, where their next step is. If just their friends with them or parents with them, they're communicating, they're talking about what they want to do, and possibly maybe asking mom or dad to jump along with them. So just some simple ideas like that is what we've put on. Also another is resource bags and books for each community. What we're putting together with our Take 5 campaign is we're hoping to aim to put that out through public health nurses, libraries, food banks in the areas, and it would be a great collaboration if each community came on board with us for that task within their community. So the city of Lacombe would help us put bags together for Lacombe's food bank, for Lacombe's public health nurse, for families utilise areas in Lacombe. So there was just a couple of ideas that are kind of low cost, inexpensive, and in the presentation I have included a survey for you to use, or a draft template for you to use in each of the developmental domains, and there's just boxes there for you to come up with ideas of what you can maybe do in that developmental area for this low cost to inexpensive, and maybe some ideas might be higher cost and might be a longer term goal, a vision over a couple of years. So a quote I would like to end with is, learning starts in infancy, long before formal education begins, and continues throughout life. Early learning begets later learning, and early success breeds later success. So if anyone has any questions for me?
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I saw your presentation before and I loved it. And for me, it was the discussion we were having today regarding playground usage prior to seeing you tonight kind of fit perfectly, because I think we need to increase that. We spend a lot of money on our playgrounds and we want to see them utilized. And I love the idea of a map for parents to have to know what they're getting when they get to those playgrounds, because we use it with our grandchildren all the time. We go to playgrounds. The idea of things on the sidewalks, I think that's a great idea. That would also be good for us seniors also to do and to stay active. Wouldn't hurt us too much to bounce around a little bit instead of just falling down.
Yeah, it's not just the kids.
Yeah, I think these are all great ideas, and I hope we can work together and improve the usage of our playgrounds and get our kids more active in general, and get away from the TV and the screen time. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Councillor Jacobson.
Sure. So you mentioned a few ideas, painting a sidewalk. Is there anywhere that's got a bit more of a comprehensive list of things that municipalities specifically can do to start mitigating these effects of deleterious early childhood development?
Not that I'm aware of regards of paving the sidewalk. That was just what I came up with my kids, because when I'm out with I have 4 girls, and my 2 youngest are 4 and 5, and they're very much, when we're walking on the sidewalk, we have to jump over all the cracks and all the lines, and we can't walk on them in any squares. We have to kind of hop, and I was like, oh, it'd be nice if we had this don't walk on the sidewalk. But with regards to municipalities and Calgary, there's the First 2000 Days is based out of Calgary, and they're kind of an overarching umbrella collectively for their coalitions around Calgary, and they are really making leaps and bounds in the aspect of pushing this early years and what we can do. I can definitely get more information to see what they're doing within Calgary, and they actually started the playground map. So that's where, I seen that, was like, that's a great idea. That's something that we could do in our communities. Obviously theirs is a lot bigger, but they also have more, not only just a playground map, but they have ideas where resources in the community. So they have the map for the playground, but also on that is you go from A to B to C and what you can do with each area. So if there was a play group, a library time in the morning, and then if you walked on the next block, what else you could be. They have all the city resources encapsulated in the maps as well. For us, I do realise it kind of might be more cost effective maybe for them, but for our smaller communities, times change for programs and resources. They're not always the same times every week. So for printed material, it might not be wise to print it, but your playgrounds are not going to move. Once you have a playground down, you're not going to move that somewhere else last minute, and it's not restricted to times. So it's a cost-effective way for us, not included, but there is lots of more ideas, and I can definitely get more. But Calgary would be the closest proximity to us, and we're doing leaps and bounds in the area.
Sure, yeah, if you could even point me in the right direction to look, and I'll just toss it out there to my fellow councillors. The reason I'm really interested in this is if the methodology of this research is correct and there actually is an 8-to-1 factor of return, I think this would certainly fall into the discussion we very preliminarily had about how best to use our cannabis excise tax dollars whenever they do come through. So I think that's something to looking at anyway.
Chief Cowdy?
I had a couple of questions. We were hoping that we could meet with you afterwards as administration to talk about some of these ideas, and your phone number on the presentation isn't complete, so I was wondering if you could contact us.
Oh yeah, that's my cell. You can contact me anytime.
Short number.
Oh, short. Oh, sorry. That's my cell. You can contact me on that number anytime. Sorry, I totally misunderstood what you said. Yes, it's 7690, so it's 318-7690.
And I just had a question about the actual selection process. How many classes in Lacombe would be participating in this program? So there's about 700 students, 112 interviews.
This is predominantly from. We're not given an exact on classrooms. The schools themselves do get the breakdown per school. We don't. We get it as a community whole. With the number of students, I can definitely see if I can get that. I don't have it, but I can see if they've changed the way they've done these questionnaires. So what they're doing now moving forward is different to what was previously done. So these results that we've received now, we've been asked not to compare them to the previous results that came out 2 years ago, because they really learned from that initial survey that there's a lot of issues. Kids are having a lot of issues, and this is not capturing what we need to capture. So they've changed the way they have done the questionnaire, and so moving forward it does look different. But I can definitely see if I can get the numbers, because we are also looking at our coalition in the sense of we heard about just over 2 years ago Wolf Creek wasn't going to participate in this early years survey, and as a coalition when we heard that, we were like, oh no, you need to. So we rallied, a couple of us went and rallied with Wolf Creek directors, and we got them to change their mind, thankfully. There are some communities who are not quite so fortunate, and they can use Alberta's results as a whole, but they don't have the breakdown per community. So we are very, very fortunate that we do have that, and we're very fortunate that Wolf Creek listened when we did come, and we stressed the importance of this. So it is predominantly through the Wolf Creek schools. While it does give a Lacombe results, it's not a precise exact result, but it is a clear picture.
So, I guess that's right. Do you have any ideas of why the results are what they are? Because Lacombe, when I look, is worse than the provincial average, worse than the average of Blackfalds or Lacombe County.
It is tough because that's what we spoke about too as a coalition together, and even individually in the communities, for such close proximity communities and the results to be so different. The questionnaires, it is a teacher's perspective and the teacher's opinion when they're doing the questionnaire, so they are given training on it, but it is their own perspective then as well when they're coming to it. So some teachers might be harder in their expectations to others, maybe some are a bit more lenient. So while this does give us a clear picture, it's kind of not an exact representation, but it does give us a clear picture of what area we need to be focusing more on. And then also it would depend on the curriculum and how the teacher puts through that curriculum. The results, the questionnaire that is undertaken about the spring, so the teachers had the kids from September to spring, so then it would, what way the curriculum is broken down for that school year, what subject she's kind of doing in the fall to winter compared to what she might be doing in spring to summer. So it is a lot all-encompassing, just to pull out those results at the end.
Councillor Ruksha.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. Thanks, Louise, for the presentation. As you know, I've got quite a bit of background in this too. I thank you for the ideas, but I just want to tell you that Lacombe does have things on its sidewalks already. Maybe not on the main sidewalks, but a lot of the trails, they'll have the hopscotch type stuff on there. So we have started that, so that's exciting. And I looked, and we have a fairly good detailed map of our playgrounds, but I love your idea of that we could present it more if you've got a child that's 2 years old, which playground to go to, because that's kind of where I'm at right now. I've got grandchildren that are that little. So that's a really neat idea and a neat reminder for us to consider this. And I think City Council needs to be aware of too that funding follows these results too. So as Louise mentioned, that the Blackfalds Parent Link Centre and Eckville Parent Link Centre came to be due to these results quite a bit. But also we've had enhanced funding to our FCSFs due to these results in the past few years. So when our school division was hesitating with filling out the EDI, Louise is correct, we went and lobbied them to continue doing it. But the results are a little bit skewed too, because it also requires parents to be okay to sign off on it, right? They have to, and yes, the parental approval, and not all parents agree to that. Plus, these results do not take into account the independent or private schools in our community, all the homeschooled children that are in our community. So 117. I don't know how many kids are in kindergarten in Wolf Creek, but I would venture to guess that it's way less, or way more than 117. So yeah, it's capturing some of the children in our community, but not all.
Yeah, just the Wolf Creek.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cora. It doesn't give an exact, but yeah, it gives us a clear picture of where we can look at. We are funded, and we are limited funded. So with the aim of building early years tables at each community too, and collaborating with the community might help us to build resources that bit more with extra support than what we would be able to do limitedly on our own with representing the 6 communities. We can be quite limited to how much we can spend or how far we can branch.
Well, we certainly thank you for coming and presenting to us a lot of interesting information, some great ideas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My apologies for the phone number. I'm misinterpreting you, but 7690. Yes, I'm always mostly available on my cell. It depends on if the kids ring it or not. I'll leave these resources here, and thank you very much for seeing me.
And so next up, we've got a bylaw enforcement review that was asked for previously, and I'll ask our Director of Corporate Services, Director Pete Shaver, to take us through that item.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Before Council tonight is a continuation of our bylaw enforcement service level review. Tonight we're going to focus more on the costing and the hours of service. Administration is recommending that this report is accepted as information, and it's to be considered during the budget deliberations in the next few weeks. Seeing that we have once gone through the majority of this report, I want to just focus on the service level diagrams, the schedule of hours and options, and the Appendix C cost breakdown. So if we can scroll down to the very end of the report of the cost breakdown in Appendix C. This has been broken down based on the cost per staff. It's based on the 2018 budgets amounts that we have had in this last year. And basically, as I said, we break it down per staff member so that you guys can see a cost of what it would be for each service level to increase or stay the same. The revenue side of things, it is only the municipal fines and restitution that would make a difference when it comes to the individual officers in that sense. The animal licenses and the business licenses and permits are always renewed each year, so that would stay roughly the same. Further down in the goods and services, it's broken down again as per officer. The one area that is a bit outside of the realm of bylaw services is the transfer to other operating costs. That's where they have their fleet maintenance, their administrative services through finance, and their IT services through info services department. Those three items are unfortunately not part of their individual costs, but they do have a cost attributed to them. That total amount is roughly around $38,000 of the $64,875 for operating expenses. Now this amount is less the personnel costs, and we have put that in below under the amount for the CPO and a bylaw enforcement officer of $97,100 and $84,870. If we were to increase the capacity of another bylaw enforcement officer, there is a cost that would come into effect with more equipment, furniture and computers, communications and radios, and then uniforms, and a vehicle, of course. So these total amounts are what you'll see back when we look at the individual schedules of the service levels. So if you go back to page 5 of the report, one more up there, Ross. There we go. So this is what our current service level is at this time. We have 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. At the bottom you can see that the cost per operation, these are our key statistics. So the operations cost per staff member is roughly about $65,000. That was at $64,875. If we're going to add a new resource, that's the $61,000 there. For CPO1, for wages and benefits, it's $97,000 roughly. And then for a bylaw enforcement officer, for wages and benefit, it is $85,000 roughly, for a total of operating costs of $312,000. These costs are I'm sorry, just lost my spot here. If you scroll down, Ross, sorry, into the service level, so we have the 2 staff members. We have a CPO1, which is our red line, and then a bylaw enforcement officer. Again, this shows their staffing level here in terms of the number of or their hours of service as well as their shifts. The one thing that we have to consider for this is the absence per year, or the absent days per year for each staff member. On average, there will be roughly about 30 absences. When we're having staffing like this as our current service, 1 staff member can be away and we will still have continued coverage for each staff member. The one thing is that we do have our Lacombe Police Service that does support us on weekends and evenings for things like noise complaints, our off-highway vehicles, if there's any complaints regarding that, bylaw, fire bylaws, graffiti complaints, traffic bylaws, environmental complaints, Smoking and Tobacco and Reduction Act complaints, and then anything beyond that, our bylaw enforcement services would be added, would respond after they're available the next day. So our first option that we're looking at is adding a 3rd resource. This was one of the requests that we had from council to review. And what this does is allow us to have up to 120 hours of coverage in a seven-day period. It provides various scheduling options that allows both weekend coverage and extended hours. This option does come with a higher cost though. If you look at option 1.1 and the service level, you'll see that it does come out at roughly $522,000 to have 1 CPO, 2 bylaw enforcement officers. The Schedule A in the next line basically shows a different option of services. So this one here shows 10-hour shifts of 4 days a week for a bylaw enforcement officer a CPO and 2 bylaw enforcement officers. There is the opportunity to be able to extend those shifts a little bit by altering the schedule if need be, but it does provide full service on Sunday to Saturday, so 7 days a week, and some extended hours. We do have another option of different scheduling on Schedule B, which is just the next page down. Again, these are the staggered start times with the schedules, and only daytime coverage during the weekends. Our next option down includes a 3rd body, but only as a part-time staff member. So this gives full coverage for the week and extended hours, as well as some weekend coverage. This is a little less in cost. This is roughly about $480,000 going this route. And it does provide very little overtime requirements due to the fact that the part-time staff could fill in at various options. Under the next schedule here, this is a potential set of schedules that we could have for a part-time staff member. So we would just move the green person around a little bit as need be when needing to fill in for those absent days. So our next set of options that we have come up with actually include just our 2 staff members that we currently have budgeted. So what this does is that it allows for the two staff to be altered in their schedules to extend the hours, and then a couple of options with some weekend service. There's very little financial impact to this. It basically comes down to when there needs to be coverage for vacation, sick time, or training. If we look at the first schedule on option D, so with this, in terms of our costing here, what this means is that, Russ, could you slide it a little bit sideways? So you can see some of the costing over to the side. There we go. So what this means is that the wages would again be, oh, I'm sorry, are we on? Oh, I added 2 bylaw officers. It's actually only 1 bylaw enforcement officer there. And that is accurate in terms of the wages for just the 2 people and the estimated operating costs. The one thing though is that there would be estimated overtime to cover the times where people will not be available, as I said, with sick time, vacations, and training time. So that total cost for 2 people is roughly about $324,000. It's only about $12,000 different from our current level of service, and that's due to the fact of the overtime costs. So for the next 3 options that we have for scheduling, they're just different models as to with these 2 bylaw enforcement officers, or CPO and a bylaw enforcement officer. And they just give us the ability to move the schedule around to cover the extended weekday service or the weekend service. So option 2 has just only Monday to Friday service, but from 7 p.m. or 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. And then the Schedule E option has 4-hour shifts or 4 10-hour shifts of starting at 8 a.m. going until 7 p.m. But it also extends to have a weekend service as well. And then this way it can cover that one option that we have been requested by council. And then finally, the last option we have is Schedule F, which is keeping our current level of service in terms of our hours, but we schedule the staff so that they overlap only 3 days a week, and they are on their own for 2 days a week, and they work from 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. So the one last option that we have is working closer with LPS. No matter what, we're going to have to work with LPS to come up with a level of service so that they can respond at the times when people are unable to be available, or if somebody's working on their own and they need some sort of help in a safety factor there. We're going to have to open up the Memorandum of Understanding and start those discussions, as the province is requiring us to put they're giving us some requirements that we have to put in place to have proper security and communication for our members. Currently at this point, administration is supporting extending the hours of service during the week and providing a Saturday service. And hopefully to accomplish this, we can look at the 4 10-hour days. But as I said, this is provided as information for your deliberation in the budget process. I am happy to answer any questions at this time.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. It's going to take me a moment, but I apologize, Director Piché, you probably went into this when you presented this earlier, but can you remind us again why there's an operational cost attached to each bylaw officer or CPO, and why, like, because if I'm reading this correctly, there's $65,000 attached to each position over and above. No, that's some of their wages and benefits. No, it's just their wages and benefits.
No, the $65,000 is the amount to operate the department. So these are the amounts such as your office supplies, your computer and photocopier expenses, your fuel, your gas, oil, any training and conferences in that sense. So we've broken it down as just what it would cost to add another member if you're going to look at 3 options or 3 resources as an option. There's always going to be some extra costs rather than just wages and benefits, unfortunately. So we wanted to see what the true value of what it would be at that point.
Councillor Jacobson?
Thank you, Dr. Fiche. Also, just a quick clarification. Especially on the first option, I was looking at the additional equipment costs. Is that just a one-time startup cost?
Yes.
Okay, so when we look at ongoing cost, we should subtract roughly 60,000 from that number.
That's correct. Yes, absolutely.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I'm assuming more hours, we should expect more revenue, right? Because I think people are, all due respect, are expecting a higher level enforcement.
There is going to be some expected revenue. We've had no, I'm trying to think of the word, no consistent revenue source over the last year. It's hard for us to gauge because we used to have such a long-term staff from previous. It's hard for us to gauge exactly what we could see. When we had 2 previous bylaw officers just over this past 6 to 8 months, there was a lot of action going on with them. They were doing a lot of enforcement. I would expect to see an increased service, but I would like to also give it a year to ensure that we're going to do that. So.
Chief Gowdy?
I was just going to comment to Councillor Jacobson's, just to clarify. So there has been an additional startup cost. That is the one-time purchase of the equipment, uniforms, that sort of thing. And then there is the ongoing additional cost associated with each member. And in that is the depreciation of all that upfront cost, because initially we have to buy a vehicle for them. After that, we just have to account for the depreciation of the vehicle and replace it.
No one else seems to be identifying preferences here. Mine, oddly enough, does align with administration's recommendation. I like the idea of adding the coverage on Saturday. Perhaps on those overlap days, we might consider staggering the times to offer a little bit longer service on this particular example. It looks like Wednesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, not the, unless I'm mistaken, obviously those are the busiest days for or is that just an example?
It is an example, but it is true. There's more busier days throughout the week. Of course, that's when people are used to calling. Right now, that's what we see as our prime times for calls is throughout the week. Over the weekend, we might get 1 or 2 calls with messages, but our citizens haven't been conditioned to call on weekends. They a lot of times they do wait until the week to contact them. So it'd be a matter of educating citizens that they would be able to call on weekends and have a response in that sense. So yeah.
I appreciate that. Answered my next question as well, and that was, well, I guess it sounds great to have coverage on Saturday and Sunday with people having a long-standing customization and to not having that availability. I think having one of the days, Saturday, I think is probably a bit more active than a Sunday would be. And that would be a great place to start. I don't know if we necessarily need to have total coverage right off the bat, but I think this would be a tremendous improvement in my opinion. Councillor Jacobson?
Sure. So I just wanted to follow up on the CEO's comments quickly. So the additional equipment cost is the $61,000, and the ongoing depreciation is covered in the operational cost. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. And I guess just to echo your comments, Mayor Creasy, my preference is some combination of the options, or one of the options about just increasing the level with just currently with just the 2 members, and I guess essentially walking it up from there and seeing how our citizens respond to that. You know, if changing that up, you know, with very little extra cost does the trick, then great. But if there's clearly an overwhelming desire for increased service level after that, then, you know, look at that.
Thank you. Councillor Gullicks, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I also agree with that. I think that the staggered times is a great idea. I do like the idea of a part-time officer, if possible. I don't know how much availability there would be of that, because I do have some concern regarding safety and the availability of the Lacombe Police Service to assist our bylaw officers in those situations. So that would be my only concern, would be their safety on Saturdays and making sure that LPS is available.
Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I too like the situation where we're offsetting the 2 staff. I don't actually support adding any staff at this time, but I do like, probably the closest to what I would envision as good service is Schedule E, so where you do have those 4 10-hour shifts and then offsetting them. I think that does address citizen concerns about having access to bylaw officers more into the evening, where, you know, you're home from work and you know, things crop up around parking or dogs or whatnot. And I like the idea of having what I would call partial weekend service, so not necessarily the Saturday and the Sunday. I'm not really sure at this time that that's necessary to have both days, but I do like the access of a non-working day, which for most people, Saturday, and that would, you know, help to cover things like even garage sales and whatnot. But I really want to see a greater focus on bylaw type things, and a little bit less, personally, a little bit less so on, say, moving like traffic, and we're going to see that a little bit because, of course, with only 1 CPO, you're going to be a little bit limited, but that's what I want to see the focus on, because we do have a very robust LPS. That is kind of what they should be doing, and that's what I, as a councillor, I expect them to be doing. I think that's what community members expect them to be doing. So I want to see our bylaw focused really, you know, very much so on bylaws. So that's going to be the nuisance, that's going to be the noise complaints, that's going to be those types of things. So I think that Schedule E is going to offer that scope, that availability that we've been hearing that we really want, and allow those officers to really concentrate on, ideally, some proactive enforcement, and really be, you know, paying attention to those specific items that's their realm and not LPS.
Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Councillor Hibbs said so well. I have nothing to add. Actually, I totally agree with what she says here, what she stated here, and that you know, I don't think we should be hiring anybody this time, but let's try a different formula, different hours, and yeah, the focus needs to be on bylaw. Absolutely. Let's get that area straightened out first and not worry about so much about traffic or anything like that. So absolutely, I totally agree with Councillor Hibbs.
Anyone else? Councillor Ross.
Mayor Creasy, on the option 1.2, wouldn't it be an advantage to have the part-time covering holidays? You know, either isn't there an advantage to yourself as administration to have that extra 0.5 option?
There certainly is, in one sense. I don't know if we're there yet, 100%. I would like to see the extended hours personally, just in terms of operating the department for the next year. Let's see how it works, and if there is a need, it would probably be beneficial to come back in a year or so to say that we need to add another body at that time. We are looking at using overtime as part of that, but we do have a memorandum of understanding with Lacombe Police Service, and the opportunity to work with them and to open up that memorandum a little bit more is actually there, and I think that we could have quite a bit of success with that.
Chief Cody?
I think one of the hesitations we had about the additional half-time staff, number one, the quality of candidate that you can attract for a part-time bylaw officer, and then number two, just the nature of the position itself. There's a lot of fixed costs associated with each position, so whether it's a half-time position or a full-time position, we still need a computer, access to moves, or to the provincial databases. We need a uniform and a truck and a desk, and a lot of those additional costs are incremental, and so there's no sort of half a truck or half a uniform.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. But just to confirm or clarify that if we had extended these 10-hour shifts, that's what you're, then there is potential that 5 days a week, like only Wednesday and Thursday would be double staffed. So for any of the other 5 days, there could be no bylaw officer on staff because of those 30 days that you were talking about earlier.
Currently, right now, we have been working very minimal staff right now. We've actually been doing okay. It's definitely not proactive at this point, but we are being quite reactive. And Lacombe Police Services actually helped us out quite a bit, as has our contract with Animal Services. We can handle 1 day at least without a bylaw officer for the odd time. But if it's a planned thing, we would ensure that we have proper coverage or we have extended service with the other officer, for sure.
So to try and get a bit of consensus in this, Council, I seem to be hearing that the majority of you seem to feel that trying to make a system work with 2 positions would be preferable at this point in time. Is that a fair statement? And then I heard some appetite for some partial weekend coverage, which I think was certainly the direction that was given the administration previously. So is there, someone that brought up the Schedule E, option 3, I believe it was. Is that the direction we're leaning, or would you have some issues with that? Basically, I'd like to see some sort of motion to give our administration some direction, and we can take that into account for further budgetary talks as well. So, Chief Cody?
So actually, this evening, we were just looking to make sure that Council felt that this report was suitably informed to bring to the next Council meeting, and we'll certainly get definitive direction there. This evening for the committee meeting, we really just wanted to make sure that we hadn't missed any sort of options that you really wanted to see there. But we'll certainly bring back the options with the existing staff, the 2 staff, for your discussion at our next meeting, and hopefully endorsement.
Appreciate that clarification. So with the discussions and the comments we've had, are you clear on the direction that Council is wanting to go with?
I believe we are suitably clear. We will bring all options in case you have a change of mind between now and the committee meeting or the Council meeting, but I think we are comfortable that there's no missing information or missing options that Council wanted to see for the final decision.
Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I move that Council accept this report as information to be considered during budget deliberations.
I appreciate your intent, but I actually misspoke when I said motions, because this is a committee meeting. So I think that the administration has certainly a great indication of the direction we're leaning at this point in time. Any additional questions or concerns for Director Piche? Appreciate the information. I would suggest by the length of that report, there was an awful lot of work and went into that. We appreciate it. And Manager DeBresser is Wait at the back there, okay. Move on to new business under financial services for the 2019 capital budget. While you're getting your papers ready there, I had a few individuals asked me what was with the purple today and the purple bows, and I had an opportunity to drop by the police station earlier on today and acknowledge the start of the Domestic Violence Prevention Month with the tagline, "Domestic violence has no place in our community." So you've seen these hanging on trees and signage and stuff all over the city. And they also wanted all of council to have a purple ribbon to wear in recognition of this important month. So I'll have these passed around as well. I think that's an important thing, I think, for the education of everyone in the community to know that there is help for individuals in need in our community. I think this whole acknowledgement started from 3 very feisty individuals in Hinton, Alberta, and has grown into a province-wide movement, and they've certainly done an excellent job. And it's up to us to get the word out that help is available, whether it's a critical time of need, phone 911, or if it's perhaps not so critical to phone the Alberta hotline at, memory serves me correctly, I think it's 310-1818, so 310-1818. And I think they've got individuals on there staffing that hotline 24/7, around the clock all year long, and I think available in, I believe they said 170 different languages. So there's certainly no reason for people not to have access to the help and resources that they need in that critical time. So, are you ready to proceed, Justin?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So tonight, administration is bringing back the 2019 capital budget for discussion. Tonight we will actually go through project by project, getting your thoughts and comments on the projects and what we've actually presented. Just want to make one note: there has been a change on the vehicle replacement for the police. They're only going to replace one vehicle next year, so we'll talk to that once we get there. But approximately $6.5 million in new projects is slated here with 43 different projects. Jordan and myself will be presenting. Jordan will be going through the projects. Any funding questions can be directed to myself. And then, yeah, we'll open up for any comments as per projects once we move on. So the majority of the capital spending is under engineered structures, which is our road utilities, utility mains, sidewalks, lift stations, reservoirs. So I'll pass it over to Jordan to go through project number 1.
Thank you, Manager DeBresser. Just in terms of flow tonight, I think what I'll do, if it's all right, I'll just continue through the projects kind of sequentially in order. And then certainly if there's any questions about any specific projects, we can address them if that's all right. So in terms of on the expenditure side, in the 2019 capital budget, item number 1 being the annual sidewalk replacement program. This is something that has been included in the city's capital budget annually. It's driven primarily to replace sidewalks within the downtown area, based on a priority assessment of based on sidewalk condition. And when we do that, we would upgrade the sidewalks to a higher aesthetic standard to be more in line with recommendations in the downtown area redevelopment plan. And so we will be talking about later when we get into the 10-year capital plan as well, about the downtown area development plan. So just put a pin in that one just for now. The next few projects, North Star Drive, Opal Close, 59th Street Crescent, those are projects that were assessed in 2018. If you recall, we had conducted a number of assessments, or had some money in the budget this year to do a number of assessments of a few projects, and these ones were identified as being high priority projects to address next year. And so for whether it be the deficient road structure or the issues with the underground utilities that are critical, these projects have been identified for replacement next year. That brings me to item number 6, North Star Drive, Gordon Road to Valley Crescent, as well as Valley Crescent to Valley Crescent. So this is continuing on in North Star Drive. Based on our assessments of the east end of North Star Drive, we do believe that the issues that are present there in the underground mains are very likely present farther down that road. And so we do want to take a look and confirm that. And so in the budget is design work to look at that on the west side of North Star Drive, and to confirm that in fact is work that needs to be done sooner rather than later. Next item, number 8, Service Road, Woodland Drive to Dickens Lane. So this is again looking at what needs to be done to upgrade, replace the deteriorated asphalt and road structure that is present on the service roads. Moving down to Pump House A, this is a generator replacement. This is an item that is, if council recalls, we had 2 generators, one for Pump House B, one for Pump House A, that were generally the same age. The Pump House B reservoir had failed, and it needed replacement, and so we are moving Pump House A ahead to next year as well. Item number 10 is a sewer service camera. This is a camera, this is just a replacement item of the small residential push camera that allows our crews to investigate potential issues in service mains. So this is a smaller camera that is intended just to look at the services, although we have used it for a number of years with limited capability to look at issues that are in the actual main pipe. It's only so long and is unable to go from manhole to manhole, for instance. It can only see an initial section based on its length. That brings us to the next item, which is a sewer main flush camera. And so we're proposing to purchase a new piece of equipment that does allow us to look from manhole to manhole and do a more complete investigation in-house of our underground mains. Fairway Drive, included in the budget is the construction of sidewalk along Fairway Drive. We have shifted the sidewalk, or the proposed location of the sidewalk, to the south side of the road. Previously it was on the north side of the road, which did require pedestrians to cross a number of the cul-de-sac intersections, we'll call them, on the north side of the road. As a consequence of shifting it from the north to the south, there's just more sidewalk to construct. Instead of having the road be there, there's more sidewalk in it, and the budget has been increased slightly for that as well. The lake connection, so this is the Kenner's outlet project, so construction is planned for next year. Lake Ann to Crana gravity feed storming. This is the connection of Crana Lake and Lake Ann. This is the design work for that connection, and so this will allow for the establishment of a high water level of Crana, or of Lake Ann, which will allow, I guess, more development of the trail system around, or at least the certainty around the trail system around that lake, as well as this is one item that is keeping the development of the lakes subdivision, which is a small development in that area, from proceeding. The next item, Knightsbridge drainage swale. This is actually a carryover from this year. When in this intersection, there's a drainage issue that is causing water in the spring to back up and cause local flooding, which is impacting private property. And so when we looked at establishing a drainage swale, or actually once we've done some further investigation in terms of the actual grades, we found that we needed to modify more of the grades in the actual intersection. So what will end up happening is we'll end up having to essentially redo the pavement of the entire intersection in order to establish a swale that allows drainage through that intersection. And so the same idea for item 16 and item 17. There are drainage issues at both of those intersections, and the design work next year that we're proposing will allow us to confirm that in fact that we do have the grades that are required to establish a swale. We do suspect though that similar to Knightsbridge, that more full intersection pavement work will be required for both of those, and so for 2020 construction we do have $100,000 for each of those projects as well. And then item 18, this is a capital item request from the airport, and it has just been included as requested.
Just before you continue on, we've got a question from Councillor Ross.
My apologies for interrupting. Thank you, Mayor Creasy. There was a citizen brought up there was a lack of a manhole or drainage issue in English Estates. Do you remember that one that's been brought up annually? And my apologies for addresses, but just wondering if this address is one of them. Are you aware of that one? It kind of like there's not a drain at this particular intersection. This couple's brought up.
It sounds like this would be it. It could be it. Certainly, there's no storm system in this area, and this one of the
in English Estates.
In English Estates, yeah. This is Knightsbridge. This is on the north end of English Estates, and so water pools at that kind of in the northwest corner of that intersection, and does back up quite significantly into private property.
Okay, thank you.
So it may be, but I don't know for certain. Moving on to buildings, there's a number of building units here that are at the end of their life and are in the plan for next year for replacement. So a number of these items are end of life items, and so certainly they're in the plan as scheduled. Equipment, mobile, computer, hardware, software, and other portable equipment. And service life focused. There's a new capital item under budgeting software, which Manager DeBresser could possibly talk to if there were any questions. Then the next item is asset management plan. So one of the items in Council's strategic plan is to develop an asset management policy and strategy by the end of this year. And then going forward, develop 3 asset management plans by 2021, I believe. And so the development of that asset management policy and strategy is well underway. And so we will be bringing forward that a proposed policy and strategy on December 12th for Council's consideration. And certainly this is an extension of that work to continue to invest in the asset management system so that we can ensure that we have sustainable planning of our infrastructure for the long term. We have a number of items identified as replacement skid steers. They're listed as replacements, but they are part of the Muni Flip program, and so that's an annual lease program. Arena trailer. This is a replacement of a trailer that the arena staff used to load and haul chemical primarily from out of town into the arena. Zamboni replacement and the mower snowblade with the snowblade attachment are items that are end of their life, and so they're scheduled for replacement and included in the plan. That's included for the Kubota Unit 644 as well. Moving on to vehicles, Manager DeBresser highlighted.
Dr. Thompson, you had missed item 28, the website optimization for $35,000. Maybe could I impose on Director Piché to make a comment there?
Thank you, CEO Gowdy. The website upgrade is basically just to refresh our current site. There's been comments regarding narrowing down what the navigation is, as well as cleaning up some of the pages and making it easier for the citizens to be able to find information. So this is one of the focuses that we're going to be doing next year. A lot of it is going to get cleaned up, and we're going to really cut back on a lot of our pages as to what is put out there. We want to ensure that citizens get information, but we want to make sure it's relevant information, and that we're going to be monitoring on the analytics as to what they are looking for. And we'll be able to monitor the search criteria as to what is being searched for, and how we can make sure that we ensure that that information is there for them.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'm aware of MuniFlip programs, but kind of aware of the long-standing history of both of these companies. Do you not put it out to tender to seek the opportunity with other companies just to have a comparative costs, or because I know Bobcat's been several years, I know Kubota's been several years, but there's a lot of other product lines that I think with the economy are pretty aggressive to business.
So whenever we are doing capital replacement, we go through a full RFP process. For the MuniFlip program, with that annual cost of around $4,200, that is below our capital threshold where we would require a full tender. We would still typically go for quotes. Given the nature of the program, you are kind of locked into a long-term relationship with these companies, and so to switch is kind of a philosophical shift for the city back to probably capital purchase, full depreciation, and then purchase a new unit, which, well, we tried to get away from that because the nature of this equipment is that it's so critical to the work that we do that to have it ran down to the end of life does risk our ability to provide the service that we're committed to for the citizens.
For example, the Kubota 3990, that's, I know John Deere does MuniFlips with even Lawn and Garden with the City of Edmonton and so forth. So I'm just saying there's other options for more municipal flips with other equipment, I guess is what I'm trying to say as well.
And I don't think we've, in the past, made use of MuniFlip programs beyond the skid steers, but it's certainly something we're open to.
So on that note, moving on to vehicles, Manager DeBresser had highlighted, I think, a change to the police unit vehicle. Perhaps that would be the time.
Sure. Project number 37 there will be delayed until 2021, and the police unit 6L09 will be replaced in 2019 for a reduced amount. That 66,000 is going to about 45,000.
The next few vehicles are identified at the end of their life, and so those are scheduled for replacement as well. Same with the number 42, the garbage truck unit, that is identified as an end of life replacement as well. The Starton's handy van, H194, that's an end of life replacement as well. And that's the van that was referenced by FCSS during their presentation as being replaced next year. And so with that does conclude the list of capital projects identified for next year.
Appreciate that information. Going back a little ways there to the generator in Pump House A, we had, I think we replaced Pump House B because of a catastrophic failure with it, and at that time Pump House A generators portrayed as being not particularly critical. But I'm just curious why we would choose to replace this now with the other new be in place, why would we wait for it to fail if it wasn't critical in the first place?
So the pump house B generator failed, and A and B generators are about the same make, and they're about the same age. And so when B failed, we looked at the generator make and model and type for an A, and because it was the same age, it was the same make and model. The issues with B being it's difficult to replace, parts are hard to find, so that if A were to fail, we would have to come back and ask for council's endorsement of at that point would be an unplanned expenditure to replace pump house A. They were both in the 10-year plan, I believe, anyway, but so certainly it could be that the pump house A generator is excluded from this plan, and we just wait for it to fail. But certainly it is a risk that when that does happen, that we would need to do a tender process and go through a procurement process more on an urgent or an unplanned basis and bring forward a proposal for council's consideration. If we do it this way, then we're able to do that, I guess, when we have some time to do that.
Okay. And one other thing with regard to buildings, so the rooftop units in this building, have they become troublesome as well? I know we replaced, 4 smaller furnace units here 6 or 8 weeks ago, and now these ones are being done, which I'm not suggesting that we can do without heat here. I'm just curious, have they become so problematic that what is it that's...
Sure, I think it's a great question, and I will defer to Director Vaughn.
Thank you. I think that this was deferred already once, and there have been increasing issues with heat and cooling in this facility. And so the concern is, of course, when they go down, it's much harder to get the service companies out here and get the replacement done quickly, and we are without whatever they're providing, heat or cooling. So I think that was the rationale for that.
Thank you. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Getting back to garbage truck replacement, I thought I understood in the past administration was looking into loss of revenue to our commercial businesses, and if that's going to be an issue or an ongoing issue if we can't replace that loss of income, has it ever been explored to contract out all garbage pickup? Would that, I guess, has that been looked at in the past? What's that cost comparison? Contract it all out. If we're not competitive to our commercial garbage, then are we possibly not competitive with our residential that we can be done for less?
I would say there's never been a concerted effort to explore privatization of the garbage service. One of the reasons right now that a commercial contractor may have the ability to provide cheaper service to commercial pickups is that the city pays for its landfill fees and a lot of its waste handling transfer site fees through the Lacombe Regional Solid Waste Commission on a per capita basis. And so there is, while we have an overhead that has to be accounted for through our rates, there's a differential to those commercial contractors that they don't have that same overhead. I think that that is a really critical thing that needs to be looked at in the future. And I believe your strategic plan identifies in 2019 or 2020, 2020, a review of your solid waste management services, which I think is well needed at that point. Even in the case of a privatization of a municipal service, you would often be handing over those trucks. You would be making an agreement maybe for even your employees to have some continued service with the new contract. So I don't think that it negates the need for the replacement of the truck today. But it is something that in the future should definitely be looked at.
Thank you.
Do you have another item as well?
Yes, I had just a couple of quick comments. So the reason that I would recommend against running the Pump House A generator to failure versus the Pump House B generator is in terms of its actual capacity in your water distribution system. Pump House B is an outdated pumping station that has 3 pumps that I think are 30, 60, and 90 horsepower. Pump House A is actually a really significant component of your system, and were it to fail in an emergency situation, that Pump House A provides probably 80% of the pressure and flow for your low pressure water zone, whereas Pump House B is maybe 15%. It's very, very little. So I think the consequence of failure from the generator at Pump House A is much, much higher than in Pump House B. And then I had a question, just in terms of the equipment, the vehicle replacements, I wanted to be specific that just because a Startons handy van is listed there or a Dodge Dakota, that's not necessarily indicative of what kind of equipment will be purchased in the future. So even a Kubota, we'll go out and we'll talk to John Deere, we'll talk to, I wish I had some more off the top of my head, but other manufacturers as well for that equipment.
Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I have a question about number 14 under engineering structures. Briefly touched on that. That's the Lake Anne to Crana gravity fed storm main. So that first expenditure for 2019 is just for design work, is that correct? And then the project is expected to happen in 2020 for $880,000. Can you just sort of expand again a little bit on that project? I think that's something that was discussed quite a long time ago, not really with this council. I'm not really sure we're all up to speed on exactly what that looks like, what that incorporates. I guess my biggest concern here is that that's a lot of money, and I'm just wondering like what that actually benefits. Like, because we've talked about some other projects that we have on the go, and while they're big dollars, they have a large impact on the community. And my concern with this project specifically is that it's big dollars, but not necessarily going to positively affect a lot of residents. So just if you could expand on that project, that would be fabulous.
Sure. So thank you for that question. So a couple of reasons that project is on the capital plan is there's the first one, and I think that I guess the impetus for the project is but not necessarily the most important reason, is the fact that there's an undeveloped area in kind of north of the lake subdivision that is proposed, that there's an adopted outline plan for called the Rosemont Estates and Bowler Ridge subdivision. And it, like the north end of Lacombe, where there is no adequate outlet for development and a stormwater outlet. And so the Alberta Environment Parks has said that they will not permit further development to utilize those water bodies unless an adequate outlet has been established. And so for the north end of Lacombe, that's the Henders Outlet Project. And for this one, connecting Lake Anne to Crana, and then Crana as a part of our storm system, does provide that adequate outlet for the development of those areas. The other reason that this project is on the books is the water levels have been somewhat of a concern for the community for some time. The water levels changing, it impacts the trails and the development around that lake. And so what has happened, or what we've done over the last few years, this year excluded, was we've had a pumping program to try to do an internal assessment of the characteristics of how that lake responds to rainwater events, how it responds to spring water melt, and in order to try to determine whether those changing water levels are kind of a seasonal thing that will kind of recede and go away over time, or if it's something that we can expect to see going forward. And the results of that assessment, unfortunately, didn't really give us the answers we needed. And so, and we looked at lift stations and other things that we could employ to stabilize the water levels around that lake. Ultimately, what we said is the establishment of a gravity sewer connection is likely the answer moving forward anyway, regardless of the source of the changing water levels. And so that's what's been included in here for further design into construction in 2020.
Chief Cuddy?
So facilitating the development of Rosemont Estates and Ballard Ridge actually is more than just the approval of, say, 30 some lots or whatever it is. It also is a critical part of bringing infrastructure to the edge of Rosedale Valley, which is the most viable option for bringing infrastructure out into that undeveloped portion between Highway 2 and the current city boundary. So we went through the intermunicipal development process 3 years ago. That's when I would say this development became sort of a bigger piece to Lacomb's servicing strategy than just an approval of an isolated 30 lots or so.
Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So just a little follow-up then. You did make the sort of the relationship between what we're doing up in Henners and this project, and I get that because I see the similarity. However, the project in the north will be largely funded by offsite levies, if I recall correctly. I don't necessarily see that being the case in this situation because we're talking about a lot smaller of a property. However, perhaps the explanation of this project benefiting the development of the sort of the northwest, I guess, side could potentially then draw in more like offsite levies then to cover that, because I see that as being a big difference. I see this project costing the municipality more than the Henners one in regards to that, because we're not collecting the offsite levies to offset that, if that makes sense. Or maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Yeah, you are correct, and perhaps Manager DeBrusser could correct me if I'm wrong. But unlike the North, you're right. Unlike the Henners project, this one is not offset levy funded, and so there'd be other funding sources to pay for this project.
So I have no doubt that this is going to be needed in the future. I guess I'm just kind of amazed how we could spend $900,000 on a free draining system. Is this not just a single level, maximum level set drainage, much like Crana Lake is?
It's similar. In order to facilitate the gravity drainage from Lake Anne into Crana, the outlet structure of Crana Lake actually has to be modified, and so that involves work at Crana Lake as well as in 58th Street in order to ensure that the high water level of Crana Lake or the outlet from Crana Lake is low enough to allow Lake Anne to drain into Crana and then out into our storm system. And so the work involves a connection from Crana Lake to Lake Anne, as well as a significant amount of work on the outlet structure from Crana Lake and then into 58th Street to ensure that the storm system does drain by gravity. Because right now, if we just made a connection, it would not drain. It would not drain by gravity, not without significant rise in water levels in Lake Anne. Like the water levels in Lake Anne would have to be significantly higher than where they are now and where we've seen them in order to drain by gravity into Crana Lake.
So then why are we putting in a gravity system if it won't work?
So I think what Director Thompson is referring to is that there's actually a relaying of about 100 meters of pipe that currently is not at an elevation that would allow if the lake to build up to a sufficient level. Now, I don't think, I hate to disagree here, I don't think the connection is actually from Elizabeth Lake and Lake Anne to Crana Lake. I think it actually bypasses Crana Lake and goes through the city's storm system. And so there is a relaying of pipe to get the grade such that we're able to drain from the lake into our existing system. Otherwise, the pipe is just too high where it's close to the lake.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'm not quite ready to put this one to bed yet. Where does it drain to now? Like, where does it, you say there's an outlet?
So currently, Crana Lake does drain ultimately to Bruns Pond and then down, I think it's 45th, is that the 45th, and then under the
underneath the highway
airport, under the highway,
okay,
and then to Wolf Creek from there.
Okay, thank you.
Not through the airport, it's your line. Sorry, yes, that's right.
Okay, no, thank you for that. I wasn't entirely sure. I get the reasoning behind this in terms of infrastructure to Rosedale Valley, and what that could look like in the future. The only problem I've ever had with this whole project of what is it, Boyd Estates? Boyd? Yeah. And again, I've seen this report. I don't know if others on councils have seen it, but the biggest issue one of the issues I've had back then already, because we had a lot of public feedback, of course, people wanted this to be retained as a green space and so forth. But one of the issues is that if the developer, instead of putting 30 lots in, put less lots in, then the setbacks from the water would be such that this wasn't even going to be an issue. But because he's trying to maximize the land completely, his setbacks to the water are such that Alberta Environment said that that's not, the water levels are too high then in relation to where you want to be. So I struggle with this one a little bit too, in that it's a lot of money. To me, that's so that the developer can maximize the usage of his land, as opposed to, he could actually already be building in there, from my understanding of that report, if you put less lots in and the setbacks from the water were more. Again, I need to review that, but so this one kind of sticks in my throat a little bit too. It is a lot of money. To me, that just, I get the Rosedale Valley point of view, but to me, just helps facilitate a developer build his development.
So, respectfully, that's not my understanding of the report. When we've talked to Alberta Environment, their indication was that the development of a single lot, a single additional lot draining into Elizabeth Lake or Lake Anne would require some level of control to be installed on Elizabeth Lake and Lake Anne. I think when we had previously presented the report, I think one of the things we had talked about was that setback for Elizabeth Park, and that no accommodation had been made for the stormwater development or stormwater management in Elizabeth Park, which drains right to Elizabeth Lake, and so that the maximization of lots there certainly contributed to the situation we find ourselves in now. The developer, of course, in Elizabeth Park is also the developer of here, and so I think that's some of the crossover. But when we meet with Alberta Environment and Parks, they have told us there will be no approval of any development draining into Elizabeth Lake or Lake Anne until there's a plan in place for control of that outline.
Councillor Jacobson?
Yeah, so if you could just remind me again of why there wouldn't be any offset levies doing this piece, is because for that quarter they've all been paid way back when?
So the city has not traditionally engaged in the application of offset levies for stormwater infrastructure. It's probably the simplest reason. At the time when we were going through the intermunicipal development plan, the modernized MGA had not been read. It wasn't forthcoming, and so there was no opportunity for intermunicipal offsite levies. The majority of the offsite levy for this project, for example, would probably be attributable to the existing Elizabeth Park, which is an opportunity, and then to that unannexed portion on the northwest corner of Lacombe, including Rosedale Valley, and with no opportunity for intermunicipal offsite levies at that time. It just wasn't a discussion that came up. Is the short answer. Or the longer answer. The short answer is when we redo our offset levies, I would expect that at that time this would be identified for offset levies, additional offset levies.
Okay, so we can, that's something that can be done when that's, like, we don't have to, there's no statute of limitations, for lack of a better term, on when you can discuss it, as long as there's been no developments happen there yet.
Correct, but I'm not aware of where a project that had been constructed would be retroactively applied via offset levies. So I think if you constructed this, it would be very difficult to come back and say to this land, now you owe this much.
Sure, so I guess then that kind of falls out of that. And so if we go ahead with the engineering design of this, that's not considered construction yet, right? That's just...
No, I don't think that would be considered construction. I think that would be an eligible cost that can be included into a future update of the offsite levy, as well as the cost for the actual project, which we would have a better handle on, thanks to the design work.
Okay, and yeah, and the only reason I'm just bringing this up is, we're going to get paid back for our stormwater management in Henner's Pond there at some point. And if the citizens and developers getting the benefit of that or paying for that down the road, I think it would be only fair to at least look at this in our offsite levy reassessment down the road, at least have the discussion about it.
So I think we can. I just want to caution you that this area, if we're to look at the overall benefiting area of an outlet out to Elizabeth Lake and Lake Anne, this area would represent, I would guess, less than 10% of the eligible benefiting area. The vast majority of it would be attributable to the existing neighborhoods of Elizabeth Park, which that opportunity has passed for charging offset levies.
Well, 10% is better than 0%.
10% is better than 0%.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I hate to change the subject, but anyhow, back to the bylaw, like the proposal from Director Piche. You did mention something about vehicles. Okay, so now we have a vehicle, a bylaw vehicle 41 as a capital purchase. So in your proposal, that's in the operating budget, right? And this is coming out of capital. So is it the same vehicle? What are we... I'm just wondering where the money's coming from.
Thank you, Councillor Hoekstra. The $45,000 in the initial bylaw review that we just went through is for the very first purchase of a vehicle. What happens is that the initial purchase is always done from the department, and then all replacement costs are built in later on. I'm assuming it works for fleet the same as IT, right? Yeah, okay. So, yeah.
So basically, we make the purchase initially from the operating budget, and then the depreciation is forever, ever after reflected in the common services recovery, which Manager DeBresser calculates depending on how much is coming out on each year, and so it's just a shift. There are two different vehicles.
Clear on that one then? Very good. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. And my pausing going back to the garbage issue, but with commercial business going to other options, their garbage has to be going somewhere, and if it's going to the Lacombe Regional Solid Waste, shouldn't that be an issue brought up to Lacombe Regional Solid Waste that their charge for tonnage should be comparable or appropriate to the municipalities so that it's on an even playing field? But that seems too simple of a solution, but there's got to be a lot more to this.
So definitely there are options, and Director Thompson is working on a brief to sort of outline some of these options to work with our council representatives on that board. I would say, given the long-standing history there and the regional partnerships we have, we want to make sure that we're getting it right when we have that discussion, that we have all the correct information, and it is going to take some time. But certainly we are working on that very thing right now, and you're absolutely right. There needs to be something looked at to ensure that those commercial businesses are paying their fair share towards our commission.
Thank you.
Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just, and maybe this question was asked when I was out of the room, but as far as the handy van goes, of course I was on council when this thing was rolled out. Was it brand new, donation? How do you determine end of life? Is it a strictly kilometers thing as far as that goes, or because I'm just surprised already we're replacing it.
So mileage is one consideration, but the other one is how often it comes in for repairs. And then the other thing is the viability of the actual seating plan and the number of people that are traveling that use wheelchairs or don't use wheelchairs and those kinds of things. This handy van is, I think, a couple of years, like maybe a year past when we would have liked to have replaced it. The vans are very busy, and I think it's just as an indicator of a high level of use. I will let you know that we have received a $5,000 anonymous donation towards the van. We will be using reserve funds, and then the balance will probably be funded through grants or something.
Okay, thank you for that. And then on that same vein, the arena trailer, again, there's no kilometers on that thing, so to speak, but how do you determine if that thing's at end of life? It's just that, is it a repair thing, or is it, I don't know what this thing looks like. Maybe it's really bad. But.
I think on this particular piece of equipment, it's just wearing out. We bought the trailers and started transferring the chemicals and equipment ourselves because the freight charges were so excessive that it was costing us far more money to have the materials delivered here. And so that trailer is used to haul chemicals for both the pool, mostly the pool I would say, but for the arena as well. And it's the chemicals and the filters that we require. And I think that the replacement on it is linked to repairs, but also just how it is working after all the hours of use that it has endured.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, to the skid steer, we're not replacing them per se. That's just a lease payment. I mean, they're 2018.
No, so the way the program works, it is essentially a lease, but it is an annual lease where we put new tires on it, pay this fee, and then we get a brand new unit, and they're able to resell it. And I'm sure they market it as municipal use, as if we're light users or something. Gotcha. Jokes on whoever buys that one.
Director Thompson?
I wish I could stop it from flashing, but it continues nonetheless.
Turn the power off.
I was just indicating that you could proceed, or you completed.
I am complete on complete my presentation on the 2019 portion, and then I'll be jumping back in when we're presenting the 10-year capital plan. So I think turn it back over to Manager DeBrusker.
Thank you, Director Thompson. One thing I did want to point out is Fairway Drive, the sidewalk for Fairway Drive. One of the funding mechanisms that has been identified in the previous 10-year capital plan has been local improvement levy for the residents along that strip there. It's estimated at 30% and approximately $166,000. So that's just want to make you aware that that is one of the funding mechanisms of doing that sidewalk down that drive.
Councillor Connick.
That's an excellent point, Manager DeBrusker. Glad you brought that up because I totally forgot about that. I know in my previous conference councils, I don't know, many of you have heard this refrain already, people want this done. A lot of people want this done there, but there are a great many, some who've lived there for many, many years, who said, we've never had a sidewalk, we don't need a sidewalk, and they sure as heck don't want to pay for it. So this 30%, is that the standard amount, or is that amount that can be amended, and how does that factor? So you're saying of the 553, whatever it is there, 166, or is that 166 on top of that yet? Or is that 166 built into that?
So the 166 is built in, and I would say the standard amount is 100%. Usually a developer includes sidewalks in their development at the time of construction, and home purchasers pay for that in their lot purchase price. Why we have gone to 30% here is that typically a developer would spread out those concrete costs on more than just the fronting lots. So for example, those cul-de-sac lots would probably be paying a portion of the sidewalk in a traditional build-out of a development. Here, the MGA does not give you the option to apply an offsite levy to non-fronting property. And so we said those fronting properties should not be responsible for the 100%. The area should be, but that opportunity isn't there. And so the fairest is to provide some lower level of contribution. These are opinion.
Okay, no, that's fair. Thank you for that. Does that also, that 30% apply to roads, i.e. Len Thompson? Or is that a fair amount for that?
So I would make the same comments there, that typically the paving of a lot, or the paving of a road is attributed to the lot cost when a developer sells the lot.
So, just to recap the sidewalk issue in the Fairway area. Initially, it was agreed on by the council of the day to not include sidewalks in that particular area and make allowances for the trail system that connects various areas. Is that the basic gist of it?
I wasn't around for the discussions. I would be surprised that I think that's a generous interpretation of it, because most of our developments today have both sidewalks and an interconnected trail system. So without full knowledge, I would say that that's one way of interpreting it. I think that our expectations now of developers are both trails and sidewalks, and I would add sidewalks on both sides of the road, not just one, which we're discussing here.
Just as further clarification, is that 30% being collected going forward, or it has been collected?
So we would recommend, when we've done local improvements before, we've done it through a 10-year collection process where the city would add it to the taxes for 10 years and then collect as an additional rider. But that would be going forward.
Director Vaughn.
I just wanted to make one comment, and that is that in the neighborhood where Fairway Drive is, the connecting trail runs up the center of the subdivision, and so you come off of Little Dipper Park, and there is a trail that runs east-west, but there is no provision besides a very small side yard where you have a small MR to get back onto the rest of our green space.
Any additional comments or questions on our 2019 capital budget before we proceed on to the 10-year review? Seeing none, I'll ask that Manager DeBresser go through the 10-year plan review, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So similar to what we did with the 2019 budget, definitely I'll be here for the funding side of questions. Jordan would like to talk about the philosophy going forward, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you very much, Manager DeBresser. Presented to Council tonight is the 10-year capital plan for consideration. The plan outlines the city's anticipated capital expenditures and allocates funding for these expenditures such that the 10-year plan is fully funded as presented. Funding sources, which Manager DeBresser here can address any questions on, include provincial grants, including MSI, federal grants, including the federal gas tax reserve, city reserves, third-party contributions, and debt funding. In total, the plan identifies $52.4 million in capital expenditures over 10 years. I'm just going to highlight some of the projects in the plan that are in the 1 to 3 year horizon, and then I'll follow that up with the 4 to 10 year horizon, and how asset management will ultimately help us inform some of those projects a little clearer. So for 2019, there's a network system replacements are constructed based on engineering assessments completed in 28. So these are the North Star Drive, Opal Close, and the projects that I went through earlier. We have included engineering assessments of Brownstone Road, which is the road beside the airport, and the Highway 2A service roads in 2019-2020 for replacement, or at least anticipated replacement in 2020 and 2021. As highlighted earlier, there are 2 58th Street drainage improvement projects identified for 2019. There's new construction is anticipated in the following areas, primarily driven by new or planned development. and that includes the Henners Pond Outfall Project, as well as new offsite levy-funded water trunk mains and a new sanitary sewer lift station to support development in the north end. And so those are projects that are really development-driven, and so depending on the pace of development in the north end, those projects may or may not move forward, excluding the Outfall project, which is definitely moving forward. Within the central area of Lacombe, we talked about tonight about the Lake Anne Crown Lake connection. And in the south area, we are anticipating new offset levy funded water mains. And again, these are dependent on the pace of development and how that plays out in the coming years. New sidewalk construction is identified in Fairway Drive, as well as at the end of 58th Street on 2021. So there's a sidewalk on the west side of 58th Street in the south end of town that just dead ends, and so there's a project to connect that sidewalk south to the city's trail system on the south end of town. Pump House B Reservoir, which is quite a large project identified in 2021 for replacement, is identified there because it's based on a 2003 water distribution study. However, the west area, either in the city or the county, has been identified as an advantageous location for a new reservoir to provide service to the county and city, which, if implemented, would mean Pump House B could be decommissioned. The outcome of upcoming discussions with the county, particularly ICF discussions, will provide administration guidance on the scope and better timing of this project. Airport capital plan, or capital improvements, are included in the 10-year plan as requested of the club. There are a number of end-of-life building system replacements that are included and scheduled in the 10-year plan as well. The reservoir and lift station communication upgrades, known as SCADA in the plan, are planned and included in the 10-year plan to allow for the collection and analysis of facility operations data and remote operations of those facilities. Equipment replacements are scheduled to meet the needs of city operations and maintaining service levels expected of the community. And note this section also includes the replacement of IT equipment and associated core systems such as the website. Playground replacements are included are budgeted as identified in the 10-year plan as well. There's some discussion tonight on fleet replacement. So the fleet replacements are generally based on a 10 or 11-year replacement cycle for city trucks, a 4-year replacement cycle for LPS vehicles, 8-year replacement cycle for garbage trucks, dump trucks, and heavy equipment, and skid steers. All skid steers will be on the MENAFA program starting in 2020. And so those timelines are not necessarily just 10 years, let's get a new truck. They're based on, as Director Vaughn had highlighted, based on our experience in terms of replacement costs, in terms of the downtime of that equipment, in terms of the kilometers. All these things can factor into what cycle we're planning to replace vehicles on, and so these are the ones that we've landed on that are effective and do balance the city's budget as well as our need to supply services to the residents of Lacombe. As well, there's in the plan there's a new pumper identified as an identified addition to the Lacombe Fire Department fleet. Moving forward in the 3 to 10 year horizon, that's formulated using the best available data that we do have, which can include infrastructure studies, growth projections, estimated infrastructure age, etc. But as the city is investing in improving its asset management system, its approach to identifying level of service needs, capturing whole life costs, identifying expenditure options, and prioritizing projects will certainly change. A strategic goal of Council is to adopt an asset management policy and strategy by the end of the year, and as I've indicated earlier, that will be coming forward for Council's consideration in December. Some projects that are not included in this plan, I want to make sure we're highlighting as well. Any upgrades to Sini Trail are not included in this plan. VADM software upgrades, which is our primary accounting software, are not included in this plan. Any new major trails throughout the community are not included included in the plan. A new public works building is excluded as well, along with provincial building renovations. Another area that's not included in the plan that we just wanted to bring forward for council's information is regarding the downtown area redevelopment plan. The downtown area redevelopment plan was adopted in 2013 to reflect the unique historic character of the downtown, factoring the community's vision for future growth and the development in the downtown. The city has been relatively active in implementing the recommendations in that plan, with 15 out of 24 action items either in progress, ongoing, or complete. Administration has heard some feedback, however, from residents and businesses over the years inquiring on the timing of implementing the streetscape recommendations in the DARP, not just in the downtown core, but in the residential areas within the scope of that plan. However, there are no DARP-specific implementation initiatives identified in this 10-year capital plan. The current practice and strategy for the implementation of the streetscape concepts in the DARP is to evaluate options in conjunction with other planned major work in the street or lane. The Main Street project, for instance, was driven by a sanitary sewer replacement and incorporated elements from the DARP in its final design. Council may wish to approach the implementation of DARP more proactively to provide certainty to those who will benefit from the streetscape improvements, or desire to see them, or just simply desire to see them move ahead sooner. If so, administration can bring forward a revised implementation strategy for council's consideration. One example could be that the downtown area redevelopment plan does include a concept for a streetscape project on 50th Street, and at this time there are no major works identified on that street. A major revitalization of 50th Street in line with the DARP concept is likely estimated to cost somewhere around $2 to $3 million. However, council's also heard feedback from a downtown business owner regarding a project on 50th Street, which may include additional street furniture, a new mid-block crossing, supply of power to trees, and new line markings for parking on 50th Street. And certainly a project like that, which could be considered a somewhat more modest improvement, could be done for less cost. For instance, replacement of sidewalk on both sides of the street and the installation of a mid-block crossing with pedestrian bulb outs as well as power and some other things estimated would be around $700,000 to about $1 million in terms of scope and an idea of how much something like that would cost. In either case, should council wish to administration to proceed with work on a DARP implementation strategy, administration recommends council directs it to develop a plan for inclusion in the spring amendments or the 10-year capital plan. So that concludes my presentation on the 10-year plan. So I'm available for any questions, should council.
Commissioner Thompson, you had said that improvements to C&E Trail North were not included in this plan, but so that was put off until 2029 then? Because it was identified there, mentioned somewhere.
And so they are excluded. Just to make sure we're on the right page. So the improvements to C&E Trail, like some other projects, they're identified as being funded by offset levies. At least a portion of that is being funded by offset levies. And so the portion of that upgrade is certainly development driven. As the north end of town develops further, they will contribute more to offset levies, and we'll be able to be in a position to upgrade C&E Trail to what will ultimately be an arterial road standard. And so at this time, the project is excluded from the 10-year plan, but certainly as development continues, as we have a better handle on condition of all the roadways in the city of Lacombe, as well as I guess the criticality, like what happens in the event of a road failing, like what is the actual impact, then that project may be deemed to be a higher priority than some of the others perhaps that are in the plan right now. And so certainly that's something that will be coming forward as we're developing a roads asset management plan that will include looking at scenic trails as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Connick.
Just to follow up to the mayor's question there, you talk about $10 million. It's the very first line here. Deferral of senior trail upgrades from 63rd Ave to end of corporate boundary, $10 million to 2029 or later. Yet in 2027, I see an expenditure for $1 million for that very same thing. What is that?
So, Councillor Koenig, I didn't quite catch the location you're pointing to. It was mine.
It's on Appendix A, page 4. Senior trail upgrades, 63rd Street to city limit. And in 2027, you have $1 million there. Is that something different than outside of the 10 million to upgrade the whole thing, or just looking for clarification?
So I think, yeah, that one certainly is, $1 million would not be, it's not for the actual construction of the road. That would be for upfront design to look at a phasing plan and then do a detailed design and refine numbers in terms of the actual costs and level of effort required to upgrade Senior Trail to an arterial cross-section.
Thank you for that. It's always amazing to me the design costs for some of these things. $1 million, okay. My other question, and I guess this goes back to the whole line painting. Is that an operating thing? Is that something we can at the very least do on 50th Street next year, or is that an operating or is that a capital thing?
So it is an operating thing. It is not something that the city has done before. We've never painted angle parking. Given the congestion that we're seeing on 50th Street, it is something that we had planned to do next year, but that would be an operating budget item.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I also have, for talking about 50th Street, I have a question regarding the light that's missing there. Was that hit by a vehicle?
No, actually it blew over in the wind. And so
blew over in the wind.
Those are old lights. Those lights, the poles are no longer available. Parts for them are no longer available, and the bolt pattern in the actual base itself is unique. That you can't just fix a new light to it. And so, in order to replace the light, we would have to install a whole new base with the proper bolt pattern and tie the electrical work into a new light. And so we do have some costing on that. We were hoping to get an indication from council on whether there was an appetite to move forward with a project, like a revitalization type project on 50th Street, because to do something like that it's about $25,000 to place the base and put a new light up. And so we wanted to make sure if we're doing something like that we're doing that in conjunction with other projects that may be planned. And so certainly we can move forward with that standalone, or we can move forward with a more broad project. And so we're just waiting to see what council says on that.
Has there been any? Well, I'm sure there's a concern about the lighting on that corner because it's missing. Is that not a safety issue? Or is it not that big a deal?
It's something we want to move forward with as soon as possible. To replace the base, we have to essentially close off the sidewalk and rip up a significant amount of sidewalk. We also want to consider, if we're doing a larger project, that the lighting is spaced in a way that provides even lighting and the proper spacing of lighting along that whole street. The old lights require different spacing from what new LED lights we would like to see. And so if there's an opportunity to provide that proper spacing, that we would want to do that at the same time. But certainly I think either way that light was going to be replaced next year. It's just a matter of whether that's a part of a larger project or if it's a standalone initiative.
Okay, yeah, because I can't see that happening for a long time. The large project for a number of years, even though it's wanted, and it's very expensive, so I would think there would be some, maybe the painting of the lines and some smaller things done prior to doing that full project. So I'd like to see the light go ahead as soon as possible.
Chief Gotti?
Or Director Thompson, perhaps I missed this, but there has been a request for a mid-block crossing on 50th Street. Do we have any idea of the costs of what a mid-block crossing would look like on that street? And do they appear in the 2019 capital budget?
Thank you, CEO Gowdy. In terms of a mid-block crossing on its own, what I did highlight in my presentation was the inclusion of a more modest project that involved the replacement of the sidewalk on both sides of the street, like completing that work, some street furniture, as well as the inclusion of power receptacles at each of the trees. And so that was estimated, we would estimate that to be between $700,000 and $1 million to do that type of project. Certainly just strictly a mid-block crossing with ball boats would be less than that. We replaced it's probably still going to be in the couple $100,000 range, just in terms of the level of work that's required. But that would strictly be nothing else but just putting in a ball boat and some crossing.
That's not in the budget.
And that's not in the budget. None of the DART implementation work that I've talked to today is in the budget.
So not even the continuation of the sidewalk on the east side is not in there as well?
If the money that, or the project that is identified for that is the downtown sidewalk replacement project, and so that funding is still included in the budget, and it is annually. Again, depending on council's indication of whether there's a larger project to be done in 50th Street next year, we would like to continue with the work that we've started on 50th Street to replace that sidewalk next year. However, if there's a larger project, or there's an appetite for a larger project in the short term on that street, we would look at replacing sidewalk near Lido's and in that area, which could also use replacement instead.
Councillor Jacobson?
Sure. I guess I'm going to buck the trend a bit here and talk a bit more about this DARP program. So I believe, Director Thompson, you said if there's an appetite for council to look at this, the recommendation is for administration to, did you say to come back with some revised strategies for implementation? Is that right? So I am actually very interested in seeing a proposal for that regardless. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about this. And if you think about what's something we could spend money on that would really have, again, a multiplying effect on growth and viability in our city here. Like, what is it that sets Lacombe apart when you think about someone coming to potentially move here? I mean, is it our subdivisions? Not really. I mean, we don't have a signature subdivision that, sets us apart from everyone else. We obviously don't have a lakefront like Sylvan Lake. We're not close to Red Deer like Black Falls. And I hear in my day job overwhelmingly from time to time, it's like our downtown core that really sets us apart. So I'm not a woman, so I wouldn't know what it's like to highlight one asset. However, I would suggest that, let's put some money into our downtown core. Let's at least look at that and see what that looks like, because I think that would be a very, very, very interesting way, again, to multiply our dollars in terms of money spent and then exponential growth and tax received for that. So I would at the very least like to see what that looked like. And pardon me for my rude expression. I apologize. I was back in my day job for a second.
Councillor Hoopstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I guess I would like to echo, other than the remark, what Councillor Jacobson said. But I guess my understanding of the downtown revitalization, if we went complete on it, that would become a walking street, right? Is that correct? 50th Street, was it set up to be a walking street? And see, and I guess after a day like today, when you feel that wind blowing up, I'd rather that we look at some minor, well, you didn't call it minor, but a different kind of presentation of how we could revitalize that street. I would certainly like to see that as well.
Councillor Klonick?
Sure, count me in. I always thought the dark plan was a really good plan, but I thought that particular street was rather ambitious what they envisioned there. And it talked about doing the back alleys too. It was wonderful to look at, but I just don't think, especially given the success of some of the businesses in there, if you're gonna take all that parking out, you gotta replace it somewhere, and that's impossible. But I do like the idea of, it's still $1 million just to put some power in, and it blows me away, but anyways, I'd certainly like to explore that a little bit more and see what that, if we're going to continue with the sidewalk, well then what is that, then why not do the, the mid crosswalk too then, right? Like, let's see some numbers on what it would, to do that very thing, sidewalk, mid walk, or mid crosswalk, the lighting. If it is $1 million, wow, but hopefully it would come in much cheaper than that, and I think that, at the very least, would then sustain that street for many years to come.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Further parking options. Basically, Hannah Seeds is renovating and Popo's is relocating, and it seems like the rest of them buildings to the south are more or less vacant. A few years ago, I entertained the option to previous council of swapping land to Len Thompson or to the tenant owners. That might be an area to revitalize as well and still have land asset, but to have more parking as well. But just an option is to think, yeah, you're going to have to walk a block, but perhaps then employees of the businesses could park elsewhere to allow more room for customers. I think some of the people parking on 50th Street are tenants above the buildings that are like living accommodating on top of those businesses, that those vehicles. It's kind of be nice to have them businesses encourage them employees or of the businesses to park elsewhere that's taken up. I agree with Councillor Oakster. I don't think you can take away all the parking. That's good. I understand the downtown theme of our historical value, but to create just a walking and lose all that parking, I think that's how do you do both, I guess.
Councillor Jacobson?
Sure, I guess we're getting the cart ahead of the horse here quite a bit, but I haven't reviewed the dark plan in detail, but what downtown that's developed is highly parkable? I mean, sure. as downtown cores get developed, they just become more intense, and parking is more and more, you go anywhere and you're that's got a developed downtown, and you're genuinely walking at least a block or two, and you're pretty happy about that if you get that, right? So I think, in an ideal world, yes, but in my opinion, that should, if you're thinking long term, that should probably be a 1B instead of a 1A consideration.
I'm sorry, Councillor Gulletson, I missed your late there.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I agree with all this, but I also think that we need to move slowly and take opportunities to use that street. And I think Lacombe Days is a prime example. And I believe there's a movement to move a lot of the activities from Lacombe Days to 50th Street next year and close it during that event and get a feeling for what the community wants from that area before we spend a whole bunch of money. And I think that the downtown core is a place for us to have our little festivals and expand on that usage. And that one street is the one opportunity we have. And I think we can do it at lower cost and find out what the feeling is of the community before we spend a lot of money.
Was there some other items you wanted to go through, Director Thompson?
No, not this time.
Thank you.
So that is the conclusion of the 10-year capital plan items. I guess just as a foreshadowing for our next meeting, which is the council meeting that we're discussing these items, we would be looking for direction if there's any desire for us to bring back a DARPA implementation plan or do costing or any consultation. Right now, there is no strategy for that. And so we would be looking for some sort of official direction that way before we're taking any action.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I do echo in the past that even Brendan Bond brought this up, it would be awesome to have a downtown business association for input. And it's kind of frustrating because we're here as a council to support them in ways moving direction, but yet it's kind of we don't have that in place. That source is that, do we kind of have a presentation of DARP that to expand it as an opportunity during our budget, that if this is an option for downtown to try to get them to try to have some engagement? I guess it's, just, I know sometimes there's always two sides to every story, but I mean, we're trying to encourage public input to have some information on the potential of DARP to come back for our budget open house and then publicly engage it, that like as an opportunity for public engagement for our budget open house, and just a thought.
Certainly could. Again, pending council's direction to do so, we would be happy to take that step, but currently nothing's in place.
Is that too soon? Okay, hypothetically, we're having a budget open house, and I don't forget what the date is. Is that too soon to also go to publicly ask for people's input to downtown to kind of expand more on the opportunity of public engagement, like as our budget feedback? Is that too soon?
It would be too soon to have any additional detail, probably beyond what we've given you this evening. I mean, we could have copies of the DARP plan and that sort of thing, but if you're looking for more detailed pricing, we really are hesitant to take any sort of, or have been hesitant to take any sort of steps towards this, both publicly or internally, because we haven't received direction from councils to expend resources on it, and we don't want to create a sense of expectation in the community, particularly that downtown business community, that this is an impending reality or something. So we've tried to take a very cautious approach.
Don't do the cart before the horse, whatever that saying is.
I was going to say that I think we've got some pretty solid plans in place here already, and I'm not sure that we need to get strayed too far away from what we have currently. There's a lot of great ideas that were put forward by some of the businesses down there, but to expect these to happen this soon, I don't think is realistic at this time, so I would like to take a little more cautious approach for that development as well myself, but Director Bond?
I just want to make a comment on the Downtown Business Association. I think that if council were to take the time to review a plan and implementation strategy and have some true costing and phasing and understanding of that, that may in fact increase a willingness or an interest in forming a formalized business association downtown. Truthfully, business associations do start out with some municipal leadership and some funding behind them, and so I would reintroduce that idea at that time if we were going to do that, saying that the city would be prepared to provide some seed money and some leadership, but that within a year or 2 years you would have a formal downtown business association, which they operate very independent of the municipality, and they are their own association where they're funding their own programs and they access grants and such. So I think there'd be an opportunity there, but I don't think there's a guarantee, and I think as the city moves forward and we feel we still want a downtown business association, I think we will have to invest in that to some extent as a pilot.
Councillor Jacobson?
Sorry, just to be clear, this question to CEO, you're looking for direction this evening on that, or just moving forward at any time kind of thing?
No, I can't get any direction this evening. I just didn't want to set a sort of an expectation that we were going to be working on anything without official direction.
And I guess to clarify my position, I think I would align with both what actually Director Bond, Councillor Gullikson, and Mayor Creasy said, in that I wouldn't expect that this is going to be done next year. However, I would genuinely like to see what Director Vaughan said, an actual plan, like revisit the whole thing, look at the plan, get the consultation, and then even if it's implemented at some point in the next 10 years, but just again, have that discussion and see where it can feasibly slot in, and if it can't, at least we know why, kind of thing, right? But it's important enough to me as a council that I would genuinely like to see that and review that and vote on it anyway.
Councillor Lukshaw.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I guess I wanted to follow up with your comment that I'm not comfortable that it isn't in the 10-year plan. Like you were saying, you don't want to rush it, but on the flip side, I would be uncomfortable telling some of these businesses that there is zero plan to do anything in the next 10 years. That I wouldn't be comfortable with. I think that administration, I would like to be part of tasking the administration to start looking at something sooner than later.
I think that's a good comment, but that's certainly not the case that there is no plan in place either. There is money set aside each year for sidewalk improvements, well, not some of which have been identified for that very area. So it's not like we haven't allocated anything. That's very, very much not the truth.
But correct me if I'm wrong, that funding does not take into account any of this downtown improvement, or like the DART, like that would put special lighting in or special sidewalks. That is just basic improvement. Am I not correct on that?
No, it did include new sidewalks as well, which was part of the DART layout. So there is some overlap there. You're correct, it didn't take into account lighting and whatnot, but my fear is that when the property owners are finding how much the lighting and whatnot is going to cost, that might not be quite such a priority as they once thought it could be. But certainly we need to have that discussion and probably communicate that to them for sure. So, I've got 7:35. Let's take a short 5-minute break and reconvene at in 5 minutes.
Isn't anything else? Is anything else now?
We got in. Food. I'm sorry, my apologies. I thought we had added an in-camera item. We had discussed in-camera item and decided not to do it, so my apologies for that.
For what reason did we decide not to do this? Is it just a procedural? It'd be better during council?
Just because there wasn't any it wasn't brought forward.
Your procedural bylaw, which includes your open forum, does not allow for the discussion of an item both to be presented at the open forum and discussed in council at this stage.
So do we have anything further? We can have one motion. Thank you, Councillor Hibbs, to adjourn at 7:35. Thank you.
Since we, council, consider yourself lucky. Something